As the Israel-Palestine conflict remains unresolved and haunting images of starving Gaza children continue to grip the world, Canada has unexpectedly announced it will recognize the State of Palestine at the United Nations in September. However, this decision comes with conditions. While some European countries have made similar moves, some dissenting voices fear this action could encourage ongoing violence.
On July 30th, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney stated that Canada intends to recognize the State of Palestine at the United Nations in September. Speaking to reporters, Carney said the plan is based on the Palestinian Authority's commitment to reforms, including comprehensive governance restructuring and holding general elections in 2026, in which Hamas will not be allowed to participate. Previously, Canada had long maintained that it would only recognize a Palestinian state once peace negotiations with Israel were concluded. However, Carney emphasized that the current reality on the ground, including the starvation of Gaza's population, means the prospect of a Palestinian state is slipping away before our eyes.
For the reasons I cited earlier, Canada intends to recognize the State of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025. This intention is predicated on the Palestinian Authority's commitment to much-needed reforms, including commitments by the Palestinian Authority's President Abbas to fundamentally reform its governance, to hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state. Canada will increase its efforts in supporting strong democratic governance in Palestine and the contributions of its people to a more peaceful and hopeful future. I spoke today with President Abbas at length to reaffirm his commitments. Canada reiterates that Hamas must immediately release all hostages taken in the horrific terrorist attack of October 7th, that Hamas must disarm, and that Hamas must play no role in the future governance of Palestine. Canada will always steadfastly support Israel's existence as an independent state in the Middle East, living in peace and security. Any path to lasting peace for Israel also requires a viable and stable Palestinian state, and one that recognizes Israel's inalienable right to security and peace.
Des Affaires étrangères du Canada. After a few remarks, we'll go to the question period.
Canada will be a constructive partner in building a just, meaningful, and lasting peace in the region, and a future that respects the dignity, security, and the aspirations of all Palestinians and Israelis.
Prime Minister, you have the floor.
The deepening suffering of civilians leaves no room for delay in coordinated international action to support peace, security, and the dignity of human life. Preserving a two-state solution means standing with all people who choose peace over violence or terrorism. And it means honoring their innate desire for peaceful coexistence of Israeli and Palestinian states as the only roadmap for a secure and prosperous long-term future. Prospects for a two-state solution have been steadily and gravely eroded, including by the pervasive threat of Hamas terrorism to Israel and its people, culminating in the heinous attack of October 7, 2023, and the terrorist organization Hamas's long-standing violent rejection of Israel's right to exist and its rejection of a two-state solution. A belief in a two-state solution, the inalienable rights of both peoples, and the fact that peace and security could only be achieved through it. That prospect, that possibility of a two-state solution is being eroded before our eyes. That has been one of the factors that has brought us to this point, to try to reverse with partners. We're not under illusions about the strength of Canada, but to reverse with partners this cycle so that a two-state solution becomes viable. Lots more has to happen for it to. Le devoir de faire respecter. The United States is the essential partner in peace in the Middle East, and in virtually in many parts of the world. And we've seen that demonstrated. First point. Second point is that the president does take a direct interest in resolving conflicts, and as has with respect to a broader set of developments in the Middle East. And so again, the United States, this president, will play and continue to play a central role. Others have responsibilities, Canada included. Two-state solution in New York. And part of this, again, is, let's go back to where we're starting, which is we are working ourselves with others to preserve the possibility of a two-state solution.
Previously, the United Kingdom had announced that it is prepared to recognize the State of Palestine at the United Nations General Assembly in September unless Israel takes steps to improve the situation in Gaza and promote peace. Survivors of the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel, who were once held hostage in Gaza, have expressed outrage at the UK's decision. Among them is Louis Har, an Israeli hostage rescued after 129 days of captivity in a military operation. He told Reuters that he is deeply concerned for the remaining hostages and believes that recognizing a Palestinian state will not bring real benefits to Palestinians as long as Hamas remains in control. Har stated that he believes the world has ignored what happened on October 7th and is solely focused on the suffering of Palestinians.
The problem now, in this moment, is like the people looking only for the Palestinian people and forget what happened the October the 7th, and forget we have 20 civils from Israel in captivity, and it's not important for the people. The Hamas do it what they want, and for this continues the war, and the war must to finish. But we need all the people back in Israel. And the war don't look about that, just looking what happened to the Palestinians. It's a problem why from one side all Europe and countries from all the world try to be good with the Palestinians and don't looking for the real problem, the Hamas. As you say, to give the country, okay, and what doing with that? The war here continues. The problem with the Hamas continues. The people from Palestine don't have food. It's not Israel don't give the food. It's Hamas take all the food for himself and give it only for his persons. And it's not only from now. It's all the time, before the 7th of October too. And Hamas is taking everything. The big problem here is Hamas.
Meanwhile, both pro-Israel and pro-Palestine groups in the United Kingdom have jointly expressed dissatisfaction with the British government's announcement that it will formally recognize the State of Palestine in September, unless the Israeli government takes concrete steps to alleviate suffering in Gaza and meet other conditions. Speaking to Reuters on July 30th, Ben Jamal, director of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, stated that this move is still far from what is needed.
It is framed as Britain showing its support for the Palestinian people's right of self-determination by recognising statehood, but makes that conditional upon Israel's actions. It doesn't frame it as an inalienable right. It makes it effectively a bargaining chip. And the message to the Palestinian people that Keir Starmer is delivering effectively is, we will acknowledge your right to self-determination by recognising your state, unless in the next few weeks Israel stops starving you and stops threatening to annex your land. And if Israel does those things, then we won't. By a margin of 4-1, the British people support a demand for an arms embargo, for divestment by public bodies, for action taken in relation, for example, to force British supermarkets to stop selling Israeli goods. These are all supported by the British public. But what we've seen in the past few weeks, as the British public have seen these images of starving children, is that spreading as a sentiment across the whole of British society. We've seen the front page of the Daily Express saying, stop this shames us all. We've even seen figures like Michael Caine speaking up and saying this is grotesque, stop it. It's nowhere near enough. And look, as a basic measure, the things I've outlined, suspension of all trade, sanctions against all leaders of Israel, freezing of Israeli assets in UK banks, full military arms embargo. These are the actions that the previous government, endorsed by the Labour Party when it was in opposition, took immediately when Russia illegally invaded and occupied Ukraine. They acted immediately to say, in order to protect international law, we need every lever of pressure that we can place on Russia. And they reached for the full sanctions playbook. Well, we're asking for exactly, long overdue, the same type of actions taken against Israel.
On the other side, Public Affairs Director at Jewish Leadership Council, Russell Langer, said that Britain's recognition plan is clearly a reward for the terrorism and just isn't acceptable.
We have always opposed unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state. The reason being that while we support all efforts to create peace in the region, this is an unhelpful move at this time. It's about the timing more than anything else. Ultimately, by the government's own admission, the, UK recognition won't bring a Palestinian state into being. If anything, it encourages people to believe that a solution can be imposed on the inside rather than a solution built out of a proper peace process in the area. In making it the conditions that they have made it, by putting the conditions on Israel and not being clear that Hamas is that recognition cannot happen while Hamas continues to hold hostages and is in control of the Gaza Strip. What the government is doing is clearly a reward for the terrorism that has been perpetrated by Hamas. And that just isn't acceptable. And the government has time. There's time between now and September to make that clear. And they haven't done so yet.
The two-state solution is the idea of establishing two separate territories for Israel and Palestine. This concept emerged when the United Nations in 1947 divided Palestine under British mandate into two regions for Palestinians and Jews. Conflicts that erupted in the decades following Israel's establishment in 1948 have hindered efforts to create a Palestinian state. In 1993, under the US-mediated Oslo Accords, Israel and the Palestinian Authority agreed that Palestine would govern the West Bank and Gaza. However, the ongoing expansion of Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank, along with Israeli policies that challenge Palestinian territorial claims, continues to undermine the viability of a two-state solution.